The alarms screamed through every station in the outer rim of the galaxy. On monitoring post Theta 7, Captain Vexlar's scales rippled with instinctive fear as he stared at the impossible readings on his screen. Something was emerging from the void shroud. For 3,000 years, every civilization in the galaxy had known one absolute truth. Nothing entered the Forbidden Zone and survived. The void shroud was a 50-light-year sphere of space where physics simply stopped working. Ships that ventured too close reported their instruments going mad before they wisely retreated. Those foolish enough to continue were never heard from again. Ancient warnings in dead languages surrounded the zone, all saying the same thing: stay away. Vexlar's clawed hands trembled as he initiated the emergency protocols. Within minutes, every major government in the galaxy would know. Something was coming out of the place where nothing should exist. The sensor officer, a young Krell named Sithra, turned to him with wide eyes. "Captain, we have visual confirmation. It's a ship. It's under power." "That's impossible," Vexlar whispered, but he moved to the viewing screen anyway. There it was, a vessel perhaps 200 meters long, blocky and inelegant, with visible hull plating that looked almost primitive. It tumbled slightly as it moved, as if the pilot was struggling with controls. But it was intact. It was moving. It was alive. "Run identification," Vexlar ordered, his military training overriding his shock. The computer worked for several seconds, longer than usual. When the result appeared, Vexlar felt his inner eyelids close in disbelief. "Human design," Sithra read aloud. "Vessel classification unknown. Technology level, Captain, this says they're a pre-contact species from the outer rim. They shouldn't even have faster-than-light capability." Humans. Vexlar had heard of them in intelligence briefings. A species discovered only 70 years ago, barely crawling out of their own solar system. They were considered harmless, irrelevant. The major powers had planned to initiate formal contact in another century or two, once the humans had developed enough to be worth talking to. And now they had emerged from the void shroud. The communication console chimed. Sithra's fingers danced across the controls. Then she looked up in confusion. "Captain, they're broadcasting. Audio only. Standard galactic frequency." "Play it," Vexlar said. The voice that came through was female, speaking accented but understandable galactic common. She sounded tired. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Solar Colonial Ship Magellan, requesting navigational assistance. Our jump drive experienced a malfunction, and our star charts aren't matching known coordinates. We're looking for the nearest way station. Please respond." Vexlar stared at the speaker. The human didn't sound like someone who had just achieved the impossible. She sounded like a lost traveler asking for directions. "Should I respond, Captain?" Sithra asked. Before Vexlar could answer, his superior officer appeared on his communication screen. Admiral Thockrun, commander of the entire Outer Rim Defense Fleet, looked as shaken as Vexlar felt. "Captain, you are to establish minimal contact with that vessel. Guide them to quarantine coordinates Epsilon 9. Under no circumstances are they to approach any populated systems. A special science team is being assembled. The Council wants answers." "Yes, Admiral," Vexlar said. "But sir, what if they're hostile? What if this is some kind of weapon?" Thockrun's expression hardened. "Then we contain them. But something tells me these humans have no idea what they've just done. Proceed with caution, Captain. You're dealing with something unprecedented." The communication ended. Vexlar took a deep breath and nodded to Sithra. "Open a channel." "Channel open, sir." "Human vessel Magellan, this is Captain Vexlar of the Galactic Concordat Monitoring Station Theta 7. We are transmitting navigation coordinates to a way station where you can receive assistance. Please follow these coordinates exactly and do not deviate from the provided route." There was a pause. Then the human voice came back, and Vexlar could hear the relief in it. "Thank you, Theta-7. We're receiving your coordinates now. We appreciate the help. It's been a rough couple of days." A rough couple of days. No concept of what she had just survived. As the human ship adjusted its course and began following the beacon Vexlar transmitted, he ordered a full sensor sweep. The results made his blood run cold. "Captain," Sithra said quietly, "I'm detecting trace energy signatures on the hull of that ship. The computer is having trouble classifying them, but, sir, they match theoretical models of void shroud radiation." Vexlar pulled up the data himself. There it was, clinging to the human ship like a faint glow that shouldn't exist outside the Forbidden Zone. The energy that unmade matter at the quantum level. The force that had destroyed every probe, every expedition, every foolish attempt to penetrate the mystery. And it was just sitting there on the hull of a primitive human vessel, fading slowly like morning dew. Within hours, ships began arriving from across the galaxy. Vexlar's small monitoring station became the center of the greatest scientific convergence in recorded history. Quarantine Station Epsilon 9, usually a sleepy outpost for processing merchant vessels, was hastily upgraded with containment fields and security measures. Among the arriving scientists was one Vexlar recognized from news broadcasts, Scholar Phoenix of the Architects, the foremost expert on the Forbidden Zone. The insectoid scientist had spent 200 years studying the Void Shroud from a safe distance, publishing papers that were considered the definitive work on the subject. Phoenix had stated in their most famous paper that penetrating the Void Shroud was theoretically impossible. Any matter complex enough to house consciousness would be torn apart by the contradictory physics within. Now that theory lay in ruins, and Phoenix skittered across Vexlar Station with barely contained excitement and dread. "I must see the vessel," Phoenix clicked in their native language, which the translator rendered into common. "I must speak with the crew. This changes everything we know about reality itself." "You'll have your chance," Vexlar said, "but first we establish that they're not a threat." By the time the Magellan arrived at Epsilon 9, 37 ships surrounded the quarantine station. Warships from the major powers sat alongside science vessels. Everyone wanted to witness this moment. The human ship entered the docking zone and settled into the containment field. Vexlar watched on his monitors as the airlock aligned and the humans prepared to disembark. He found himself holding his breath. In a few moments, he would see them. The species that had done what billions of advanced beings across thousands of years could not. The airlock opened, and Commander Sarah Chen stepped through. She was smaller than Vexlar expected, wearing a simple blue uniform with various insignia he didn't recognize. Her face was smooth-skinned, her hair dark and pulled back. She looked utterly, completely ordinary. Behind her came 46 more humans, all looking around with expressions of confusion and growing concern at the massive security presence. Chen approached the reception committee with her hands visible, a gesture of peace that was apparently universal. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but Vexlar could detect the tension underneath. "I'm Commander Chen. I appreciate the assistance, but this seems like an unusual amount of attention for a simple jump drive malfunction. Is there a problem?" Phoenix stepped forward before Vexlar could respond. The scholar's compound eyes fixed on Chen with an intensity that made even Vexlar uncomfortable. "Commander Chen," Phoenix said slowly, "do you know where you have been?" Chen frowned. "Our navigation was scrambled, some kind of strange space. We couldn't get a stable reading on anything until we recalibrated and jumped out." "Strange space," Phoenix repeated. "Commander, you were inside the Forbidden Zone, the Void Shroud, the place where reality itself breaks down. You were there for 6 hours, according to our monitoring, and then you emerged, alive, intact, aware." Chen looked at her crew, then back at Phoenix. "I don't understand. We followed standard emergency protocols. It was disorienting, but we managed. Vexlar watched as understanding slowly failed to dawn on the human's face. She genuinely didn't comprehend what she was saying. "Commander," he said quietly, "what you describe as standard procedure, no other species has ever survived it. You have accomplished the impossible." Sarah Chen stood in the harsh lighting of the quarantine station, surrounded by aliens and weapons, and Vexlar saw the moment when she realized that everything had changed. Her eyes widened. Her hand went to her chest, as if checking that she was still solid. "Oh," she said softly, "we need to talk, don't we?" "Yes," Fenix said, "we very much do. Because if you can survive the Void Shroud, then everything we know about the universe is wrong. And the galaxy must know why." The interrogation room on Quarantine Station Epsilon 9 was designed to make visitors feel small. Vexlar watched through the one-way glass as Commander Sarah Chen sat across from a panel of scientists, military officers, and council representatives. She had been answering questions for 6 hours straight. To her credit, she never wavered. Chen was patient, thorough, and disturbingly matter-of-fact about her experience. "We engaged the jump drive at 0400 ship time," Chen explained, for the third time, her voice showing only slight strain. "The transition felt normal at first, but when we dropped out of jump space, nothing was right. The stars were wrong. Our instruments couldn't lock on to any known pulsars. Even worse, physics seemed inconsistent." Scholar Fenix leaned forward, their antennae quivering. "Inconsistent how?" Chen pulled up a datapad and projected a video onto the room's main screen. Vexlar felt his scales tighten as he watched the footage. The interior of the Magellan looked normal enough, but outside the viewports was madness. Space itself seemed to ripple and fold. Colors that shouldn't exist pulsed in waves. Objects appeared and disappeared at random. In one shot, a crew member held up a ball and released it. Instead of floating in zero gravity, it fell upward, then sideways, then froze in midair, before suddenly accelerating out of frame. "Gravity fluctuated randomly," Shen said calmly. "Time dilation varied by location within the ship. At one point, our engineers spent what felt like 10 minutes in the engine room, but only 2 minutes passed for the rest of us. We had crew members aging at different rates, depending on which deck they were on." The room fell silent. Ambassador Kuthin of the Valorian Empire finally spoke, their translated voice dripping with suspicion. "Forgive my skepticism, Commander, but this seems convenient. A primitive species somehow accomplishes what our greatest minds deemed impossible." Chen's jaw tightened slightly. It was the first sign of anger Vexlar had seen from her. "I don't know what to tell you, Ambassador. I'm just reporting what happened. We followed our training. When the instruments failed, we went to manual calculations. When those didn't work, we made our best guess and jumped again. We got lucky." "Lucky," Quethin repeated. "You were inside the Void Shroud for 6 hours, and you got lucky." "That's all I have," Chen said firmly. "We're explorers, not miracle workers. Whatever you think we did, I can't explain it any better than our logs show." Vexlar had reviewed those logs personally. They were complete, detailed, and utterly mundane. The humans had treated their time in the Forbidden Zone like any other navigational error. They had troubleshot, recalibrated, and jumped out. There was no special procedure, no advanced technology, no secret. That was what terrified him. In the observation room, Fenix stood beside Vexlar, watching the interrogation through the glass. The scholar had barely moved for hours, absorbed in the data. "She's telling the truth," Fenix said suddenly. "How can you be certain?" Vexlar asked. "Because a lie would be more elaborate. A sophisticated species creating a cover story would have explanations, theories, scientific justifications. The humans have none of that. They simply did what seemed logical and survived." Fenix's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I've been analyzing the hull samples we took from the Magellan. Captain, the results are extraordinary. Phoenix projected the data onto the observation room screen. Vexlar saw molecular scans of the ship's outer plating, overlaid with energy signatures he'd never encountered. The void radiation is still present, but it's inert, Phoenix explained. It should be breaking down the molecular bonds of the hull, but instead it's just sitting there, slowly dissipating. I ran 17 different tests. The conclusion is unavoidable. The exotic physics of the void shroud couldn't properly interact with the human ship. Why not? Vexlar demanded. Phoenix turned to face him fully. Because the human jump drive is too simple. It's brute force technology, Captain. They literally tear a hole in space-time and push through. There's no elegant mathematics, no quantum field manipulation, no dimensional folding. They just force their way through with massive energy expenditure. Vexlar felt something cold settle in his chest. And that worked where our advanced drives failed? Was immune. Phoenix pulled up another display, showing schematics of various galactic jump drive technologies. Our drives, every advanced civilization's drives, operate by interfacing with the fundamental structure of space-time. We manipulate the universe's laws to achieve faster-than-light travel. But in the void shroud, those laws don't exist consistently. Our ships try to interface with physics that keeps changing, and they tear themselves apart. But the humans don't interface with anything. They just punch through. Their drive is so crude, so basic, that it doesn't care what the rules are. It applies force and momentum, and apparently, that's universal even in the void. The implications crashed over Vexlar like a wave. You're saying we failed because we're too advanced? Precisely. Phoenix's voice carried a note of something Vexlar had never heard from the scholar before. For 3,000 years, we assumed the void shroud was impenetrable. We never considered that it might only be impenetrable to sophisticated technology. Before Vexlar could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. His communicator activated automatically. Captain, this is Command. The Galactic Council has reached a preliminary decision. You need to see this. Vexlar and Phoenix rushed to the command center. On the main screen, the council chambers appeared, showing representatives from all 53 major civilizations. The chamber was in chaos. Delegates argued, gesticulated, and in some cases physically confronted each other. Grand Counselor Mevran, an ancient being from a species so old their name was lost to time, finally called for order. The chamber reluctantly quieted. The council is divided, Mevran announced, their voice carrying the weight of centuries. First, the Quarantine faction, led by the Valorian Empire, proposes immediate destruction of the human vessel and indefinite detention of the crew. They argue the humans represent a contamination risk we cannot assess. Vexlar's claws dug into his armrest. Chen and her crew had done nothing wrong, and they were talking about killing them. Second, the scientific faction, led by the Architect Collective, proposes comprehensive study of both the humans and their vessel. They would be granted protected status as subjects of historical importance. Subjects, Vexlar muttered. Not people. Subjects. Third, the Sovereignty faction proposes releasing the humans with full technology sharing agreements, establishing formal contact with their homeworld, and integrating them into the galactic community immediately. That surprised Vexlar. Who's leading that faction? The Remnant Council, Phoenix said quietly. Species who've been conquered or absorbed by the major powers. They see the humans as potential allies against the established order. On screen, Counselor Mevran continued. The vote will take place in 48 hours. Until then, the humans will remain in quarantine. This session is adjourned. The screen went dark. Vexlar sat in silence, processing what he'd just witnessed. The humans had no idea they were the subject of a political firestorm that could reshape the galaxy. Captain, Phoenix said carefully, I need to speak with Commander Chen privately. I have a theory, but I need to test it directly. The council said no private contact. The council is debating whether to kill her or turn her into a laboratory specimen. I don't think they have the moral authority to dictate terms right now. Phoenix's voice carried an edge Vexlar had never heard. I've dedicated my life to understanding the Void Shroud. If there's a chance to learn the truth, I must take it. Vexlar studied the scholar for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. I'll arrange it. But I'm monitoring the conversation. If anything seems dangerous, I'm pulling you out. An hour later, Phoenix sat across from Chen in a small conference room. The human looked exhausted, but alert. Vexlar watched from his monitoring station, his hand hovering over the emergency lockdown control. Commander Chen, Phoenix began, I need to ask you some questions that may seem strange. Chen smiled wearily. After the last 6 hours, I doubt anything will seem strange anymore. When you were in the Void Shroud, did you experience any psychological effects? Hallucinations, temporal displacement, identity confusion? Chen thought for a moment. We had some weird dreams. A few crew members reported seeing things that weren't there, but we attributed that to stress and exhaustion. Why? But then, why did every simulation suggest conscious beings inside the void experience complete psychological breakdown? The contradictory physics should make coherent thought impossible. Phoenix leaned forward. But you didn't break down. You remained functional. I need to understand why. I don't know, Chen said honestly. We just dealt with it. When things got weird, we focused on our training. We had jobs to do. Focused, Phoenix repeated. Commander, I'm going to propose something radical. What if your minds, like your technology, are too simple to be affected? Chen's expression hardened. I'm not sure I appreciate being called simple, scholar. I don't mean it as an insult, Phoenix said quickly. Listen to me. My species has 3 separate cognitive processes running simultaneously. We think in parallel streams, processing contradictory information and synthesizing it into unified thought. Most advanced species have similar capabilities. But humans, your brains are largely linear, correct? One primary consciousness, one stream of thought at a time. That's generally accurate, Chen admitted, her tone cautious. In the Void Shroud, multiple realities exist simultaneously. My mind would try to process all of them at once and fragment under the contradictions. But a linear mind would simply focus on one reality at a time, dismissing the others as aberrations. You survived because your consciousness is too straightforward to be torn apart. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. So we're alive because we're too primitive to understand how dead we should be. Not primitive, Phoenix corrected gently. Different. Resilient in ways we never anticipated. Before Chen could respond, Vexlar's console erupted with alerts. He watched in horror as unauthorized ships appeared on the edge of the system. 3 fast attack vessels, unmarked, but clearly military-grade. The communication came in on an encrypted channel. Ambassador Quethin's voice was cold and clear. Captain Vexlar, step aside. By order of the Valorian Empire, the human contamination will be neutralized before the Council can make a mistake. This is not a request. Vexlar's hand moved to the weapons console. The station's defenses were minimal, designed for customs enforcement, not military engagement. But he activated them anyway. Scholar, get Commander Chen to the Magellan, he ordered. Get her crew, and prepare for emergency departure. Captain, what's happening? Phoenix's voice came through the communicator. We're about to find out if I value my career more than doing what's right, Vexlar said. He opened station-wide communications. All personnel, battle stations. Protect the humans at all costs. In the conference room, Chen stood, her expression shifting from exhaustion to determination. Scholar, Take me to my ship. It seems we've overstayed our welcome. The Magellan's engines roared to life as Chen sprinted across the docking bridge, Phoenix scurrying beside her on multiple legs. Behind them, explosions rocked Quarantine Station Epsilon 9 as the Valorian attack ships opened fire. All crew, emergency departure, Chen shouted into her communicator. I don't care if you're in your pajamas. Get to the ship now. Through the station's transparent sections, she could see the 3 unmarked vessels bearing down. They were sleek, deadly, and far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. The station's defenses were holding, but barely. Energy shields flickered under the assault. Chen's first officer, Marcus Webb, met her at the airlock. Commander, we've got 42 crew aboard. 5 are still in medical. Get them. Carry them if you have to. Chen sealed her helmet and turned to Phoenix. Scholar, you need to get off this ship. Absolutely not, Phoenix replied. The insectoid scientist's translator carried surprising determination. If the Valorians are willing to commit murder to keep you silent, then the truth about the Void Shroud is more important than I realized. I'm coming with you. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment you proved my life's work was built on incorrect assumptions. Phoenix gestured toward the Magellan. Besides, you need someone who understands galactic politics. You're flying blind in more ways than one. An explosion closer than the others made the decision for them. Chen grabbed Phoenix and pulled the scholar through the airlock. Fine, but you follow my orders on my ship. Welcome aboard, scholar. The last crew members scrambled through the airlock as Marcus began the departure sequence. Chen strapped into the command chair and brought up the tactical display. What she saw made her stomach sink. The Valorian ships had stopped firing at the station and were now moving to surround the Magellan. They were faster, more maneuverable, and heavily armed. The Magellan was an exploration vessel with minimal weapons and shields designed for micrometeorite impacts, not military-grade energy weapons. Captain Vexlar is hailing us, the communications officer reported. Vexlar's reptilian face appeared on screen. Behind him, his bridge was in chaos, sparks flying from damaged consoles. Commander Chen, listen carefully. I'm transmitting coordinates to you now. It's an emergency jump point that will take you back toward the Forbidden Zone. That's suicide, Chen protested. It's survival, Vexlar countered. The Valorians won't follow you there. No one will. You'll have time to figure out your next move. What about you and your crew? Vexlar's expression softened slightly. The Valorians are committing an act of war by attacking a Concordat station. Once I file my report, they'll have bigger problems than me. But you need to go now. Those coordinates include a safe corridor through the Shroud's outer boundary. Scholar Phoenix can explain once you're clear. Chen looked at Phoenix, who nodded confirmation. She made her decision. Thank you, Captain. I won't forget this. Neither will the galaxy, Commander. Good luck. The transmission cut off. Marcus, plot the jump. Everyone else, secure for emergency transition. The Magellan shuddered as the Valorian ships opened fire. Energy weapons splashed across the minimal shields, draining them in seconds. The next shot would hit bare hull. Jumping now, Marcus slammed his hand down on the control. Reality twisted. Chen felt the familiar lurch of jump space, but this time, there was something else, a sense of wrongness creeping in at the edges. The Void Shroud was close, and space itself seemed to know it. They emerged from the jump near the boundary of the Forbidden Zone. The stars looked subtly wrong here, their light bent by the exotic physics ahead. In the distance, Chen could see it, a region of space that seemed to shimmer and fold, where the normal black of space gave way to colors that hurt to look at. Status report, Chen ordered. Hull damage on decks 3 and 4, Marcus reported. Shields are offline. Jump drive is functional, but showing stress fractures. We've got maybe 2 more jumps before we need serious repairs. Medical reporting 7 injuries, none critical, another officer added. Chen allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They were alive. For now. Phoenix had moved to a console, and was working with surprising familiarity for someone who'd never been on a human ship. "Commander, I'm accessing the coordinates Captain Vexlar sent. There's more here than just a safe corridor." "What do you mean?" The scholar pulled up a display showing the Void Shroud's boundary region. Highlighted within was a narrow path, twisting and winding through space. "This is a stable route, or rather, relatively stable. The physics are still chaotic, but there's a pattern. Someone mapped this." "Who?" Chen moved closer to examine the data. "I don't know. The file is old, encrypted with methods I've never seen. But Captain Vexlar included a decryption key." Phoenix worked in silence for a moment. "Extraordinary. Commander, this map shows multiple routes through the outer shroud, and there's a notation here, a destination." The display zoomed in, showing a point deep within the Forbidden Zone. At that location was a marker, pulsing softly. "What is that?" Marcus asked, leaning over Chen's shoulder. "It's labeled Progenitor Station Alpha," Phoenix said quietly. "The progenitors were the first civilization in the galaxy, over 1,000,000 years ago. We found ruins of their technology, but nothing functional, nothing this size." Chen studied the map. Every instinct told her to run, to jump as far from the Forbidden Zone as possible, and hide. But she was an explorer at heart, and this was the discovery of a lifetime. "How big is this station?" she asked. Phoenix manipulated the display, pulling up estimated dimensions. The numbers made Chen's breath catch. "It's enormous. Larger than some moons. And Commander, if this data is accurate, it's still powered. After 1,000,000 years, it's still active." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "A week ago, I would have said surviving the Void Shroud was impossible," Chen replied. She made her decision. "We're going in. If someone went to the trouble of hiding this map, there's a reason. Maybe we'll find answers. Or we'll die horribly in ways the galaxy hasn't invented yet," Marcus muttered. But he was already plotting the course. The Magellan moved forward, following the winding path through the shroud's outer boundary. Immediately, the weirdness began. Instruments flickered and gave contradictory readings. The view screen showed space bending at impossible angles. But Chen noticed something different this time. "It's following a pattern," she said. "Look, every 30 seconds, the distortion repeats. It's like a rhythm." Phoenix's antenna quivered with excitement. "You're right. The shroud isn't random at its edges. It's cyclic, chaotic, but predictable chaos. That's how this route exists." They flew deeper, and the effects intensified. Time began to feel elastic. Chen watched the chronometer and realized seconds were passing at different rates, depending on where she looked. A crew member would walk across the bridge, and the journey would take 3 seconds on one side, but 5 on the other. "How are we maintaining coherence?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with stress. "The ship's structure is simple enough that it flexes with the distortions instead of breaking," Phoenix explained. "We're experiencing it, but we're not being destroyed by it. Try not to think about it too hard." Easier said than done. Chen gripped her armrests as reality bent around them. Through the view screen, she saw impossible geometries. Ships that might have been there for centuries or seconds, frozen in poses of destruction. Ghosts of failed expeditions. Then, as suddenly as it began, the chaos stabilized. They had penetrated deep enough into the shroud that the physics, while still wrong, were at least consistent in their wrongness. And ahead of them, backlit by a dead star that somehow still glowed, was the progenitor station. It was beautiful and terrifying. The structure formed a vast ring around the star, easily 1,000 kilometers in diameter. The architecture was like nothing Chen had ever seen, all flowing curves and impossible angles that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. I'm detecting power emissions, the science officer reported, voice filled with awe. Multiple reactor signatures, defensive systems, and something else, something big at the core. Life signs? Chen asked. Nothing biological, but there's activity. Automated systems, maybe, or something we can't classify. As they approached, the station seemed to notice them. Lights began illuminating along its surface, patterns flowing across the structure like thoughts through neurons. We're being scanned, Marcus said. Multiple sources. They're thorough. Shen waited, tense. This could be first contact with progenitor technology, or it could be their deaths. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then a new signal appeared on their communications array. Not radio or laser, something that transmitted directly into their receivers at faster than light speeds. It's music, the communications officer said, confused. No, wait. It's mathematics, encoded in harmonic progressions. Phoenix moved to the console, working frantically. It's a language primer. The station is teaching us how to communicate with it. Remarkable. Give me a few minutes. Those minutes felt like hours. Chen watched the massive structure slowly rotating, its surface alive with patterns she suspected held meaning she couldn't begin to understand. Finally, Phoenix looked up. I have it. Basic communication is established. Commander, the station is asking us a question. What question? It wants to know, are we ready to understand what was hidden here and why it must remain hidden? Chen looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted, her ship was damaged, and they were sitting in the most dangerous region of known space, inside an alien structure that predated human civilization by 1,000,000 years. Every rational thought said to leave. But they were here. And if there were answers to why the Void Shroud existed, why the progenitors had built this place, those answers could change everything. Tell it yes, Chen said. We're ready. The station responded immediately. A docking port opened, and a beam of light extended toward the Magellan, gently guiding them in. Well, Marcus said quietly, no going back now. There never was, Chen replied. Take us in. Nice and steady. The Magellan entered the progenitor station, and behind them, the docking port sealed shut. They were committed now, for better or worse. The station's lights pulsed in a pattern that Phoenix's translator now rendered as words. Welcome, young ones. We have waited long for someone simple enough to survive, and brave enough to seek truth. Now you will learn why some knowledge must be caged, and why you have become its keepers. Chen felt a chill run down their spine. They had come seeking answers. She suspected they were about to get more than they bargained for. The interior of the progenitor station defied comprehension. Shen walked through corridors that seemed to curve in directions her eyes insisted didn't exist. The walls were alive with flowing symbols that Phoenix explained were mathematical concepts beyond current galactic understanding. This way, the scholar said, following a glowing path that appeared beneath their feet. The station is guiding us to its central core. Chen's security team flanked them, weapons ready, but looking deeply uncomfortable. Marcus stayed on the Magellan with most of the crew, ready to make an emergency departure if needed. Chen had brought only 5 people. 2 security officers, the science officer Lieutenant Park, Phoenix, and herself. Commander, Park said, her scanner held forward. I'm detecting something ahead. Massive power signature. And something else. The readings keep changing. They rounded a corner and entered a chamber so vast that Chen couldn't see the far walls. At its center floated a structure that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, shifting between solid, energy, and something else entirely. The array, Phoenix whispered. The legends spoke of it, but I never believed it was real. As they approached, holographic images began manifesting around them. Not simple projections, but three-dimensional recordings that felt more real than reality itself. Chen watched in amazement as the images showed the galaxy as it had been 1,000,000 years ago. A voice spoke, not through their translators, but directly in their minds. It was old beyond measure, tired, and infinitely sad. "You have come," the voice said. "The first in 900,000 years to survive the shroud. We wondered if any species would develop both the primitive resilience to enter and the curiosity to seek us out. Humanity has proved adequate." "Adequate?" Chen said aloud. "Who are you?" The hologram shifted, showing beings of light and energy. "We are what remains of the progenitors. Not dead, not truly alive. We are the wardens, bound to this place by choice and necessity." The images changed, showing a civilization of incredible sophistication spreading across the galaxy. Then they showed something else, a discovery. Scientists uncovering a mathematical truth, a proof that seems simple and elegant. "We achieved everything a species could achieve," the warden continued. "We mastered physics, biology, consciousness itself. And then our greatest mathematician discovered it. A proof. A simple, beautiful proof that tied together fundamental concepts in a way that finally made sense of reality." The hologram showed celebration, quickly turning to horror. Scientists who understood the proof began to change. Their forms became unstable, their minds fragmented. Some dissolved entirely. Others became things that shouldn't exist. "The proof was correct," the warden said. "That was the problem. It was so correct, so fundamentally true, that consciousness itself could not survive knowing it. The proof rewrote the rules of causality in ways that made thought impossible. Those who understood it ceased to be in any meaningful way." Phoenix was quivering, their antennae rigid with focus. "But why? How can knowledge be destructive?" "Because reality is built on necessary illusions," the warden replied. "Consciousness requires a certain blindness to function. You must believe in continuity, in cause and effect, in the separation between observer and observed. The proof showed that all of these are false, and a mind that truly understands that cannot remain coherent." The hologram showed the progenitor's desperate response. "We built this station, this array, to contain the proof. We created the void shroud around it, a region where physics becomes so unstable that the proof cannot propagate. We made it our prison." "And you stayed here?" Chen asked. "For 1,000,000 years?" "Some of us. We evolved beyond physical form, but we retained enough coherence to maintain the array. We became the wardens. We have waited, watching civilizations rise and fall, hoping that one day a species would come that could solve the problem we could not." "What problem? Why not just destroy the proof?" Lieutenant Park spoke up. "Because it is true," the warden said simply. "You cannot destroy truth. You can only contain it or learn to live with it. And we failed to learn that. Our civilization collapsed. Most of our kind faded into the cosmic background, unable to maintain identity in the face of what we knew. Only we wardens remain, and we grow fewer with each millennium." The hologram shifted again, showing the present. It showed the galactic civilizations beyond the shroud, advanced and proud. Then it showed possible futures, timelines where the proof escaped containment. In every one, civilization ended. Not through war or disaster, but through the simple fact that once enough minds understood the proof, consciousness itself became impossible. The galaxy grew silent, filled with beings who had transcended thought and become nothing. Chen felt ice in her veins. "And you want us to what? Take over as wardens?" "No," the voice said, and there was something like hope in it. "We want you to do what we could not. We want you to encrypt the proof. Hide it so completely that only certain minds can access it. Make it require a key that most species will never possess." Phoenix stepped forward. "Any encryption can be broken," given enough time and intelligence. Not if the encryption itself is tied to fundamental cognitive architecture, the warden replied. Humans are unique. Your minds are simple, linear, unsophisticated by galactic standards. But that simplicity is a strength. You process information in ways that are fundamentally different from advanced species. The hologram focused on Chen specifically, showing her brain patterns, her thought processes. You can understand the proof without being destroyed by it, because your mind compartmentalizes. You would see it as an interesting paradox, file it away, and continue functioning. Advanced species with parallel processing and quantum thought patterns cannot do this. For them, understanding is obliteration. So you want to lock the proof behind human cognitive patterns, Chen said slowly. Make it so that only human minds, thinking in human ways, can decode it. Precisely. We want the encryption to be cultural, linguistic, even emotional. We want it to require an understanding of human context that no translation algorithm could provide. Make the proof survive, but make it harmless. A secret that can only be unlocked by those who are immune to its effects. Phoenix's translator emitted a sound like a gasp. You're asking us to become the eternal guardians of knowledge that could destroy the galaxy. That's an impossible burden. It is the burden we have carried, the warden said, and we are failing. The array is degrading. In another 1,000 years, perhaps less, it will fail completely. The shroud will collapse. The proof will be exposed. Unless you help us now. Chen looked at her team. Park looked terrified. The security officers looked confused. Phoenix looked like they were processing 1,000 implications at once. If we do this, Chen said carefully, what happens to you, the wardens? We will finally be allowed to end. We have existed beyond our time, sustained only by duty. Once the proof is properly secured, we can cease. We can join the rest of our kind in dissolution. That's death, Chen said. That's rest, the warden corrected gently. We are so very tired, young commander, and you are offering us peace. Chen walked to the array, studying it up close. The mathematics flowing across its surface were beyond her, but she could sense the enormous power contained within. This was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, and they were asking her to make it hers. I need to consult my crew, she said, and Scholar Phoenix. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Time grows short, the warden warned. Even now, the array falters. You felt the shroud becoming more chaotic on your journey here. That was not random. We are losing control. Then we'll work fast, Chen promised. But I won't doom my species to an eternity of burden without understanding exactly what we're accepting. The warden's presence seemed to consider this. You have wisdom for such a young species. Very well, we will show you everything. The full proof, contained in simulated form where it cannot harm you. You will understand what you are being asked to guard, and then you will decide. Over the next hours, Chen and her team experienced something no other beings had survived. The warden showed them the proof in pieces, carefully limited so their minds could process it without breaking. Chen felt her consciousness stretch in ways she'd never imagined. She saw reality as it truly was beneath the comfortable illusions. It was beautiful and terrible and utterly incompatible with continued existence. Phoenix lasted only partway through before the scholar's mind began to fragment. Chen watched in horror as Phoenix started speaking in paradoxes, geometric patterns manifesting around their body. Stop, Chen shouted. You're destroying them. The demonstration halted immediately. Phoenix collapsed, their body twitching. But the damage was done. The scholar's multiple thought streams had tried to process contradictory truths simultaneously, and the feedback loop had nearly shattered their consciousness. Scholar Phoenix has seen too much, the warden said, with what sounded like regret. Their mind is sophisticated enough to truly understand, which means sophisticated enough to be broken. We miscalculated. Can you fix them? Chen demanded. Yes, but at a cost. They must forget what they learned. The memories must be excised completely, or they will die. Chen knelt beside Phoenix, whose eyes were unfocused, staring at angles that didn't exist. The scholar who had befriended her, who had risked everything to seek truth, was being destroyed by that very truth. Do it, Chen said quietly. Save them. The warden's power flowed through Phoenix, and gradually the scholar's form stabilized. When Phoenix's eyes refocused, they looked at Chen with confusion. Commander, what happened? I remember entering the chamber, and then nothing. You're okay, Chen said, helping the scholar up. That's what matters. But she understood now. This was what they would be protecting the galaxy from. Knowledge so profound, it destroyed those sophisticated enough to grasp it. And she had to decide if humanity would accept the burden of locking it away forever. Outside the station, unknown to Chen, events were accelerating. Captain Vexlar had filed his report, but Ambassador Quethin had countered with accusations of treason. The galaxy was fracturing between those who wanted to study the humans and those who wanted them eliminated. And time was running out. Chen stood before the array, her decision made. Behind her, Phoenix waited, with Lieutenant Park and the security team. All of them recovered from their ordeal. The scholar remembered nothing of seeing the proof, but understood that something significant had happened. We'll do it, Chen said to the warden presence, but I have conditions. Speak them, the ancient voice replied. First, this can't be humanity's burden alone. The galaxy needs to know what we're protecting and why. Not the proof itself, but the fact that it exists and that we're keeping it contained. Second, we need a failsafe. If humanity ever falls, if we go extinct or become unable to maintain the encryption, there needs to be another option. And third, the warden prompted. Chen looked back at her team. Third, you tell us how to use this array. If this knowledge is so dangerous, it can also be a deterrent. If anyone ever threatens humanity, or tries to force us to release the proof, we need to be able to defend ourselves. The warden was silent for a long moment. You would weaponize the very thing you're being asked to contain? I would make sure that protecting it is worth our while, Chen said firmly. My species didn't survive by being naive. If we're going to be guardians, we need to be guardians who can't be bullied or eliminated. That's the deal. Your condition reveals both wisdom and danger, the warden said, but we accept. You are correct that guardians must be able to defend what they guard. We will teach you the array's operation. But know this, the proof is not truly a weapon. It is a truth. Use it wrongly, and you may destroy yourselves, along with your enemies. Understood, Chen said. Now show me how to build the encryption. What followed was the most intense learning experience of Chen's life. The warden guided her through processes that were part mathematics, part linguistics, part cognitive psychology. They were encoding the proof into frameworks that only human minds, thinking in specifically human ways, could decode. Cultural references from Earth history became decryption keys. Idioms that made no sense when translated literally became structural elements. Even human emotional responses, the way fear and hope and love affected cognition, became part of the lock. It's brilliant, Park said, watching the work. You'd need to not just understand human language, but understand what it's like to be human, to think our thoughts, feel our feelings. Exactly, Chen said, her hands moving through holographic controls that the array had manifested for her. Any species trying to force their way through this encryption would need to basically become human to do it. At that point, they'd be immune to the proof's effects anyway, Phoenix finished, understanding dawning despite their memory loss. It's self-protecting, elegant. Hours passed. Chen worked until her hands shook with exhaustion. But the encryption took shape. The proof was being locked away behind layers of human cognition so deep that even humans would need specific training to access it. Finally, as Chen input the final parameters, the array pulsed with brilliant light. The encoding was complete. The most dangerous knowledge in the galaxy was now hidden behind the quirks and peculiarities of human thought. "It is done," the warden said, and Chen heard profound relief in that ancient voice. "We have one final gift for you, Commander Chen, a warning system. If the encryption is ever threatened, if someone gets too close to breaking it, you and your designated successors will know. The array will call to you across any distance." "Thank you," Chen said. She felt the weight of what they'd just accomplished settling onto her shoulders. What happens now? Now the shroud can be reduced. Not eliminated, but made safe. Ships will be able to enter and exit this region without the same dangers. The array will remain, guarded and hidden, but accessible to those who need to maintain the encryption. And we, the warden's voice grew fainter, we can finally rest. The presence began to fade. Around them, the station's lights dimmed to a steady, sustainable glow. The chaotic energy that had permeated everything became calm, ordered. "Wait," Chen said, "before you go, tell me one thing. The other civilizations that tried to enter the shroud, what happened to them?" "They tried to interface, to understand," the warden replied, barely a whisper now. "They were too advanced, too sophisticated. Like Phoenix, they saw too much and were destroyed. You succeeded because you didn't try to understand. You simply endured. That is humanity's gift, and now it is the galaxy's salvation. Thank you, young species. You have freed us from our long watch." The presence vanished. Chen stood in the sudden silence, feeling more alone than she ever had. Then Phoenix placed a gentle manipulator on her shoulder. "Come, Commander. We should return to the Magellan and inform the galaxy of what has transpired. I suspect there will be much to discuss." That was an understatement. When the Magellan emerged from the Forbidden Zone, now navigating the shroud with ease, the galaxy was waiting. Not with weapons this time, but with questions. Captain Vexlar's report had sparked a civil war within the Galactic Council. The Valorians had been censured for their attack, but the fundamental question remained: what should be done about humanity? Chen's transmission from the edge of the shroud answered that question. She explained everything, carefully editing out the specific nature of the proof, but making clear its danger and the role humanity would play in containing it. The galaxy reacted with shock, skepticism, and ultimately, grudging acceptance. They had no choice. The void shroud was now passable, proving Chen's story. The array was real, ancient, and clearly required maintenance, and humanity had demonstrated they could do what no one else could. The negotiations took months. Chen became the reluctant spokesperson for her species, thrust into diplomacy she'd never trained for. But she had allies. Vexlar, who'd sacrificed his career to protect her. Phoenix, who championed her cause despite not fully remembering why they trusted her so completely. Eventually, the Galactic Council reached a historic decision. Humanity would be granted emergency membership, not as primitives to be uplifted, but as essential partners. They would receive technology sharing, protection, and access to galactic trade routes. In exchange, they would maintain the array and keep the encryption secure. "It's not equality," Marcus pointed out as they reviewed the treaty. "We're still junior partners at best." "No," Chen agreed, "but it's respect, and it's a seat at the table we earned. Our children will build on that." 6 months after emerging from the Forbidden Zone, Chen stood on the observation deck of a new station, Shroud Watch 1. It orbited the former Forbidden Zone, now redesignated as the Sanctuary. Inside, The progenitor array hummed quietly, its dangerous knowledge safely encrypted behind the peculiarities of human thought. Chen wore a new uniform now, not of the United Solar Colonial Service, but of the Galactic Concordat. The rank insignia marked her as Warden of the Sanctuary, a position created specifically for her and her successors. Vexlar approached, his scales gleaming in the station's light. He'd been assigned as her military liaison, and over the months, they'd become genuine friends. "Commander Chen," he said, using her civilian title rather than her Concordat rank. "There's a transmission from Earth. Your government wants to know when you're coming home." Chen smiled sadly. "Tell them it'll be a while yet. Someone needs to train the next generation of wardens. And I need to make sure the array stays stable." "You've taken on a heavy burden," Vexlar observed. "Someone had to." Chen looked out at the stars, where human ships now patrol alongside Krell, Architect, and a dozen other species vessels. "A week ago, we were primitives stumbling through the dark. Now we're guardians of the galaxy's most dangerous secret. It's terrifying." "But you're handling it," Vexlar said. "Your species is handling it. Do you know what the Council calls you now, unofficially?" "I'm afraid to ask." "The Humble Ascendant." Vexlar's expression was hard to read, but Chen thought she detected approval. Species who rose not through conquest or superiority, but through resilience and accepting responsibility. "There are worse reputations." Chen laughed. "I suppose there are." A young ensign approached, human, fresh from Earth, and still wide-eyed at everything. "There's a cadet from the Architects requesting permission to study our encryption methods. Scholar Phoenix is sponsoring them." "Send them to Briefing Room 3, Chen said. "I'll meet them there in an hour." As the ensign left, Chen turned back to the viewport. In the distance, she could see the faint shimmer of the sanctuary's boundary. Inside was knowledge that could destroy consciousness itself. And humanity stood guard, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were too simple to be destroyed by it. "You know what's ironic?" Chen said to Vexlar. "We spent our entire history trying to prove we weren't primitive, that we were sophisticated and advanced. And the moment we mattered, really mattered, was when we embraced our simplicity." "Perhaps that's the lesson," Vexlar replied. "Sophistication isn't always strength. Sometimes the universe needs someone who doesn't know they should fail." About a ship that emerged from the impossible. About a crew that survived because they were too straightforward to break. About a species that became guardians because their minds worked in simple, linear, human ways. "You might be right," she said. "And if that's true, then maybe we're exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Not another advanced civilization, but a species that still remembers how to just endure." She touched her hand to the viewport, feeling the faint vibration of the station's systems. Somewhere below, in the sanctuary, the array waited. The proof remained locked away, encrypted in human thoughts and dreams and cultural quirks that no algorithm could break. It was an impossible responsibility. But then again, surviving the Void Shroud had been impossible too. And humanity had done that simply by not knowing any better. Not wisdom or power or sophistication, but the stubborn human ability to face the impossible and just keep going. Chen smiled and headed to the briefing room. There was work to do, wardens to train, and a galaxy to protect. It was terrifying and overwhelming, and completely absurd. In other words, it was perfectly human. And for the first time since this whole adventure began, Chen felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay.